the next few episodes, I want to talk about the contributing factors or causes of obesity in detail. The number one thing that we're going to talk about is genetics. Genetic predisposition plays a foundation role. It influences all metabolic processes, fat storage, appetite regulation in our body. However, genetics alone do not dictate outcomes. This introduces a concept of epigenetics, which is the changes in gene expression due to environmental factors, which further complicates the landscape. Epigenetics refers to the variables such as diet, stress, and even prenatal influences that shape an individual's susceptibility to obesity. In simple terms, think of genetics being the blueprint or instruction manual. These instructions don't change and are same in every cell. They stay the same with you your whole life. For example, inheriting a gene for eye color or curly hair from your parents, that's genetics. Epigenetics is like a light switch that turns certain genes on or off. Using instruction manual analogy, your body reads and uses or does not use these genes. One relatable example is like a cookbook. You can have the best recipes in a book, but what recipes you choose, what ingredients you pick, your cooking method, your precision, everything makes a difference in the final outcome. Translating this to the context of a disease process, you may have a gene that increases your risk for diabetes, but whether it actually gets activated or not depends on your diet and exercise. Additionally, dysfunction within the neurohormonal pathways disrupts the delicate balance of hunger and satiety signals, metabolic rate, fat distribution, and hormones play a role as well. Hormones like leptin, ghrelin, insulin, and cortisol, among others, interact in ways that can drive excessive weight gain when dysregulated. This brings us to the next important concept in understanding obesity. The next concept is about set point theory of body fat mass. This theory suggests that our body has a predetermined range of fat mass or weight that it naturally tries to maintain or defend. Our body loves homeostasis or balance. Fat mass is also physiologically regulated phenotype, which in simple terms means that it is regulated very tightly and accurately, just like body temperature and pH. At multiple stages of development, we see changes in body fat percentage. For example, gain initially and then loss of baby fat, fat changes with puberty, fat changes with aging, changes with menopause, during and after pregnancy. They're all regulated by our physiology. Obesity results from inappropriate or abnormal pathophysiological regulation of body fat mass, which means that it is unregulated. This means that the changes in underlying biology or physiology leads the body to an elevated fat mass, which is why I'm emphasizing that obesity is a disease. This disruption takes place under the time and conditions that are appropriate to causing that. So there is genetic predisposition, and then there are environmental factors, stress levels, lifestyle changes, medications, substance abuse, all that contribute to final common pathway, which is elevation of the fat mass and disruption of the underlying physiology. This is further explained by feedback regulation of energy and metabolism. When you lose weight, your body activates mechanisms to regain it, such as increasing hunger, reducing energy expenditure, increased your cravings. The energy needs at any given time are communicated to our brain from our muscles, liver, bone, by a series of cytokines. The adipose tissue communicates about our energy stores with the brain through leptin and other cytokines. I want to clarify that cytokines are a large group of signaling proteins used by cells to communicate with each other. Adipokines are specific type of cytokines that are produced by adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is the medical term for fat cells. The adipose tissue or the fat cells in our body are not just a massive blob of yellow, gelatinous, yellow, cushiony tissue that just takes up space in our body. In fact, it is a powerful and dynamic organ producing over 600 adipokines or hormones. The most common ones, or the ones that are most studied, are leptin, adiponectin, resistin, and TNF-alpha. They are a major driver of the hormone regulation and dysregulation, which makes it very difficult for us to lose weight. They contribute to all metabolic processes involved in appetite regulation, from insulin sensitivity to inflammation to pathogenesis of heart disease and other chronic diseases and cancer, like we discussed in the previous episode. One of the most important adipokines and relatively well-studied one until now is leptin. It's a hormone primarily produced by fat cells or adipocytes. Its main function is to regulate long-term energy balance by signaling to your brain to control hunger and food intake. It's the satiety hormone which helps us to feel full, satisfied, reducing the urge to eat. In perfect world, as soon as the fat mass increases, leptin should increase. Since leptin is a fullness hormone, we should be able to receive a signal to our brain that results in decreasing hunger and thereby decreasing storage of fat. However, research has shown that just like insulin resistance, too much leptin leads to a state in which the brain becomes resistant to the hormone's message. That results in reduced satiety, overeating, and then causing weight gain. And this cycle continues, worsening the cycle of increased leptin production, but because there is resistance to its action, the weight keeps going up. Research has also shown that leptin-receiving neurons in the brain have become damaged by the Western diet, which is calorie-dense and has been unnaturally modified to increase palatability, other term for highly processed foods. Eating calorie-dense foods or processed foods impairs brain's leptin signaling, which leads to reduced satiety, increased cravings, further worsening the cycle of weight gain. We are further exploring the role of leptin and weight management with potential treatment for leptin resistance. It will be a great breakthrough if we can figure out a way to manage leptin resistance, just how we have learned how to manage insulin resistance. Let's learn a little bit more about the gut hormones and the other piece in the neurohormonal pathways that are involved in energy regulation. There are also other line of communication between our gut and the hypothalamus. The most talked about hormone is the insulin. Most of us have heard about insulin resistance. It is the most common reason people gain weight and then have trouble losing it also. It is also one of the most understood mechanisms due to all the work on management of diabetes. Let's talk more about insulin resistance and what it means. Food that we consume is the fuel for our body to make and store energy. All food is composed of 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. When we eat food, any food eventually gets broken down into the building blocks that our body uses for functioning, growth, and repair. The carbohydrates get converted to glucose, protein into amino acids, and fat to fatty acids. We also know that our body is composed of multiple organ systems, elements, and molecules. Each organ system, each tissue is made of the cells at the microscopic level, and there's hundreds of different types, each with their own specific function. Our body is a perfect example of a masterpiece created by God and perfected by evolution. Coming back to the topic, one thing common to all the cells, the building blocks of our body, is that the glucose is the only instant energy source and our body's preferred source of energy. All metabolic processes, enzymatic pathways, growth, repair, communication, coordination requires energy and hence glucose. Now, the only way glucose can be taken up by cells in our body is via insulin. Insulin is like a key or the gate that opens the door on cell membrane for glucose to enter the cells. When we eat very calorie-dense meals, it results in rapid rise of glucose, making the pancreas pump out the insulin. This insulin helps with glucose uptake, but constant consumption of calorie-dense foods, when we eat too many carbohydrates and too much sugar, we end up with too much glucose. The pancreas has to work extra and overtime to secrete this insulin. Over time, with too much glucose circulating and too much fat accumulating, the insulin does not work as well as it used to, which results in insulin resistance. It is the precursor for prediabetes, also called as borderline diabetes, and then type 2 diabetes. In full-blown type 2 diabetes, you not only have insulin resistance, but the double whammy of the tired pancreas that burns out and slowly stops producing insulin at all. I would also like to mention that insulin is an anabolic hormone, which signals our body to store fat and increase hunger, continuing the cycle resulting in fat storage. This repetitive rise in blood sugars makes pancreas burn out. Then you start seeing hyperglycemia or high blood sugars in simple terms, which shows up on our blood work. The elevated blood sugars are then classified in the range from prediabetes or borderline diabetes to diabetes. This is when the diagnosis or the labs start showing changes. Now that we have learned everything that we need to learn about insulin, let's talk about other gut hormones that play a significant role. The number one is the hunger hormone, the ghrelin, like think grrr, like when you're hungry, your stomach produces that sounds. This is a gastric hormone that's produced by stomach in response to hunger. And it promotes hunger, fat deposition. It's the central drive that makes us all hungry and want to eat food. Next up are satiety hormones. Everyone has heard about Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound. These medications target the GLP-1 agonist, and the tirzepatide or Mounjaro and Zepbound also target GIP hormones. So they are targeting hunger and satiety pathways along with insulin resistance, and that's why they are so successful in treating diabetes and also helping with weight loss. The other hormones that are worth mentioning here are glucagon, amylin, insulin, as discussed above. These are secreted by pancreas in response to food and energy intake. The glucagon maintains blood glucose levels and energy homeostasis in times of limited energy food supply. So if you were not eating, you were fasting, our body is going to access those glucose stores, and glucagon is the hormone that's responsible for that. It reduces appetite and increases energy expenditure. The next one we should talk about is amylin. It is co-secreted with insulin by pancreas. It suppresses appetite and food intake, slows gastric emptying, and suppresses the release of glucagon. We'll talk about all these gut hormones in detail in subsequent episodes. I hope the information shared so far is helpful to everyone in understanding of obesity.